Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024, and this is a special governing board meeting for the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board. I hereby call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is going to be the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Next, we will take a moment of silent reflection. Okay, next we are going to move on to public comment. I'm going to read this disclaimer. Okay. Pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, response to public comment about matters not appearing on the agenda will be limited to individual board members who may ask staff to study the matter, respond to any criticism, or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be devoted to the public comment portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record. We have 2 speakers tonight. Our first speaker is going to be Katie Essen.
Thank you. Okay. Do I hit start or just? Okay. Hi, I'm Katie Essen. I am a parent of a 3rd grader at Palm Valley Elementary in the sales program. And I am just here to comment on the lack of communication for the newly established boundaries for the children in special education. I know that boundaries is a very hot topic, and you guys have spent a lot of time and hours researching and doing that. I live in Verrado. It has been very loud. I understand. But what I feel has been missed is the special ed program, specifically sales. We waited and waited to hear what was happening, what was going on, and received an email after hours on February 13th that was not directed to me, but I found out the next day it was that my son would be moving to Thomas Heck. I would just come here today to ask maybe to reconsider how those boundaries were established, reconsider who was involved in making those decisions. I know a lot of parents were not reached out to. I'm happy to, come together and work alongside the special ed team and the teachers. The sales program is so phenomenal. We moved here to Litchfield for sales. Palm Valley's been incredible. My son was a kindergartner during COVID, and I am its biggest fan. So I'm just coming here today to kind of hope that maybe we can reconsider what's been established and have some conversations and maybe just consult parents and teachers to come up with a better plan for the kiddos that are already established at Palm Valley. I know this district is growing. I know things need to go, but it is a request. So I'm just asking for more open doors and transparency in this process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Ileana Newberry.
I was going to be as good at this as she was. I go. Okay. I am also here as one of the parents of the children in the sales program. We would like our children to be given the opportunity to stay in the already established sales program that they're in at Palm Valley. Moving them to Thomas Heck would risk regression in these kids, and the exact same program and the administrative It is the exact same program, and administrative convenience is not a good enough reason. These kids are not pawns or puzzles. You can explain to a gen ed child that a change is coming, but our kids don't understand why we're making this change and will struggle. Many of us are being moved completely across the district when it was hard enough to get them to Palm Valley in the first place. Last I spoke to Miss Aiken was once 2 weeks ago. I have been calling since the 24th, 3 weeks before this letter came out, for information on what was going on or any kind of advice she could give. She has proven to be difficult to get a hold of. She's not responded to the phone call that we had, and she is not well in the know from what she was telling me. We are also not allowed variances that the gen ed is allowed. So we're potentially moving kids that don't need to be moved and risking their education, the familiarity that they have been establishing for the last 3 years, for kids that aren't here yet. Our kids have grown to love and trust the team at Palm Valley, and we would like consideration for them to stay. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the adoption of agenda and approval of consent agenda. I will go through and see if anyone has any items that they wish to pull. Ms. Moran,
Yes, I would like to remove item 5.8, the approval of architect for school 17.
Ms. Clymer,
No, no removals for me. Thank you.
Mr. Owens.
No, thank you.
I don't have any items either.
I move that we approve the consent agenda minus item 5.8.
Second.
Having a first and a second, Ms. Moran, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
I'm a yay, motion passes. We will move on to discuss item 5.8. I'll let Ms. Moran take the floor on that.
Yes, I know this could be a consent agenda item. However, I don't like to approve big deal things on consent. So I would like for us to take a moment to discuss this monumental decision. Executive Director Stone, do you have anything you'd like to add about this recommendation?
The process was rigorous, right, and put out across the state for architects to take a bid on it. At the end, there were 4 that were selected based off a point scale of some very specific questions of what we were looking for. Those 4 had about a week and a half to put together a presentation for an in-person interview with their team. And with that, it allowed the team of interviewers, as you can see who those are on the agenda item, to ask some more specific questions, see some ideas that they have already, and really get an in-depth understanding of what they're going to bring to Litchfield. And through that process, once again, a scoring rubric based, I believe our team landed with the most qualified organization that has a really unique look for a K-8 campus that we've not built yet. And so we were excited that through this, we get to work with DLR again, which Litchfield has in the past. But knowing the breadth of work that they've done across the country, and then of course here in Litchfield, we're really excited to get an opportunity to negotiate with them and see if we can get to the right terms and move on to the next stage of this process.
Okay, so just to remind the general public, our district dealings with DLR Group in the past have consisted of the transportation hub support services, I think we call that from a district standpoint,
Yes, ma'am.
as well as the new White Tanks Learning Center facility. And outside of our district, but in our feeder district, DLR Group did Canyon View High School.
That is correct.
Any other local things we should highlight from their work?
Kind of looking at Mr. Ensign. Locally,
Especially school related.
I didn't even see him
so,
sitting back
so David is our project manager for DLRs. So
All right, thank you, David Schmidt, architect with DLR Group. Other work in Arizona, Agua Fria, original Agua Fria High School in Avondale. So obviously Canyon View, we mentioned, done a lot of work with Glendale Union on various remodels. See, some stuff, Liberty rebuild, transportation facility there, as well as Las Brisas in Goodyear. Paradise Valley Sky Crossing, which is another kind of similar type of a project in terms of scale and a new build and a housing development similar to what we're talking about here. Am I good?
Yes, perfect. Just wanted to know some other projects that you guys have worked on that people might be familiar with.
Thank you.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions? Mr. Owens, Ms. Clymer?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I would just say David, along with his colleagues, has been a really awesome partner to the district over the years as well. So you have seen him around the block many times, so he's very well familiar with Litchfield and what we bring to the table. So happy to have you on board.
Awesome.
Thank
If-
you.
If there are no other questions, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve consent agenda item 5.8 as presented.
I'll second.
Having a first and a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
I am a yay. Motion passes. That's so exciting. Okay, we are going to move on to the next section of the agenda, which is discussion items. We are going to start with a presentation on the Trust Model Policy Program, which we're going to have a familiar face up here to speak with us, Ms. Jennifer McLennan.
Madam President, members of the governing board, members of the cabinet and audience, it is my pleasure and my privilege to be before you again this evening. I miss you all very much. I got to meet Mr. Owens, who is the only member of the board that I hadn't worked with prior to my transition last year to be part-time with the Arizona Risk Retention Trust. So I'm very, very glad and very happy to be back in this familiar environment with you all. I am here to present you with some information regarding the model policy program that the trust initiated approximately 2 years ago. Dr. Davidson was kind enough to invite Lillian Lee. Lillian is my partner in crime over at the trust, and he was kind enough to invite us both to cabinet. So we've presented to your cabinet as well and talked about what this might look like if your board moves forward with the transition. So Lillian and I are here to answer any questions that you have this evening. I'm going to kind of fly through my presentation. Approximately 2 years ago, the trust came to 4 of the law firms in Arizona, Gus Rosenfeld being one of them, Udall Shumway another, Wright, Welker, and Paoli, which is the primary litigation firm for the trust, and DeConcini McDonald in Tucson. And they asked those law firms to help create a policy manual from scratch. And essentially the trust was asked to do this by the members that make up the board of directors of the trust. And the reason is they had some concern that others were leaving their existing policy services and there was not going to be a safety net of policy to catch those members. Because the trust is an insurance pool, the liabilities of one do reflect on the liabilities of all. So they want to reduce the risk. So we created those from scratch, those 4 law firms. The other reason that the members were requesting it is they wanted a nonpartisan solution based solely in law. We were given 2 directives, the law firms. If there's a requirement for policy, like there is, for instance, you have to have a harassment policy, you have to have a bullying policy, create it. You have to have an IDEA policy for special education. So those are examples of have tos. The other is if it would prevent risk. If it would assist with preventing risk, let's create a policy for it. The policies themselves were meant to be streamlined, to not simply recite statute, but to try to get at the core of what you all as board members, your cabinet as leaders, and the educators would need in order to be able to serve your students. It's customizable for each school district. It has a friendly interface. We use numbers instead of letters. So I'm going to show you we'll get to a screenshot of it, but there are essentially 5 policy chapters. The first is district governance. This would be what concerns you all. So policies regarding any open meeting law concerns, your board duties and responsibility, your immunity as board members, issues concerning conflict of interest, hiring a lawyer. That's where those policies are laid. Then the admission chapter 2 has 2 policies. What are the superintendent's duties and how do you evaluate him? Your chapter 3 is business services. So this is all things Michael Vaughn. And it goes through, we tried to cover what do typical business services departments also handle. So for instance, most of the time, food services and transportation are underneath that department. So that's where you would find policies about those issues. Chapter 4 is HR. We combined your existing policy manual has policies for both your certificated folk and also for your support staff. We combined those. So you have one policy on evaluation, one policy on discipline, one policy on reduction in force, one policy on employee grievances. And then the largest chapter is students. It's the most lengthy. It should be. It's the core of your mission, and it covers everything from your enrollment requirements to your matriculation requirements, student discipline, code of conduct. And so that's what that chapter covers. There's also a glossary of terms and a quick start, and Lillian and I have been working very hard, and we just added forms. So there's forms in there as well now, sample forms. We created an alternative manual for CTEDs as well. I'm going to have Lillian come up a little bit and show you what the policy platform looks like and talk a little bit about the microscribe platform, because that's her area of expertise. So
I'm here to talk about tech stuff. So the screen you're looking at right now is not the platform, it is the Trust website. And as you can see, it's a little difficult to see, but there's 3 links on there. This is old. This is when we only had 2 districts on board with us. So the top link is just the template manual. It doesn't belong to any school districts. It's just the template. And then the 2 below that are districts. And then if you go on the Trust website now, we have 14 up. So this is an example of what it would look like. This is chapter 1. On the left-hand side, there are the policy numbers. Because it is in that numbering format, it looks very much like a table of contents. It's easy to find where things are. And then of course the titles of the policies themselves. And if you just click on any of those blue links, those policy numbers, it'll take you straight to the policy. This platform is, the equivalent to your policy bridge that you're currently using. Like Jennifer said, it is very user-friendly. Oh yeah, we do have an example. So if you see up here, this is an example of what a policy would look like. And if you look up in the right-hand corner, there's a search bar. So anybody from you, staff, to anyone in the community could go through the policy manual and type into the search bar a word, a phrase, statute, and it will pull up all the policies that reference whatever word or phrase they typed in, which is great if you don't have all 200 plus policies memorized. Some other great features are there's a translation option. I think there's 5 or 6 languages, of course, Spanish being one. You can also download these as PDF or Word files. You can print them. And the support team from the platform Microscribe, they are phenomenal. If you decide to pursue this route, once you go through the entire process of transitioning, you would just give us the policies, and it takes them about 2 weeks to set up your entire platform. And as you can see, I can't move the mouse, but you can see at the top, you'll have your logo up there and it'll just be yours. After that, it's kind of up to you how you want to work with them. You guys can choose to dedicate a staff member to do all the editing on the back end. Of course, they'll be trained by Microscribe, and anytime you guys have a policy update, they can do it. That is option 1. We recommend option 2, which is anytime your district wants to make an update, just let us know and we'll take care of it. That's all you have to do. We know this transition is quite timely. It's a burden. We want to take one extra burden off you guys. So we just prefer that you guys let us know anytime you need an update and we will take care of it. Anytime there are updates or edits, their turnaround time is very quick. I like to tell people within the week, but I mean, they'll get things done. I've seen the quickest a couple minutes. They'll have it done. So they are very quick if you are worried about that.
No, and the website is also accessible to those with visual disabilities or hearing disabilities. So it is compliant with the WCAG standards as well, which is helpful. Current model policy users. So these are the 14 districts that Lillian mentioned that are currently this school year using the model policy. First adopters were Dysart and Queen Creek, which did it by mid-year, and then the other districts started by the end of the year. I'm going to knock wood. We haven't had any major trouble. We haven't had anyone come back and say, hey, you missed the boat. We haven't had a lot of pushback from districts. In fact, most of the time when we do talk with them, they're happy. And as Lillian said, some of them, such as Dysart Unified, they adopted the trust policy manual sort of as is, and then they've taken this entire year to go over it very slowly and update. Others, Queen Creek, for instance, went through and assimilated what they wanted from their existing policy manual into the trust policy manual before adopting it. Kyrene is a good example of a district that did that as well. They went through and very methodically looked at each chapter, considered it, had first and second reads for the policies, and then adopted it as a whole in June. So there are different ways to process the transfer, and these 14 districts did it differently. Currently, we have approximately 24 districts that have already adopted the model policy agreement and committed to move forward to the trust. And this is a listing of those. Largest are Chandler, Gilbert, and Mesa Unified. The fee, we've learned this week that the fees will be the same next year. So the trust board has not increased the fees for next year. So it's approximately $455 to set up with the model policy platform. That wouldn't include your PPL fees. So you would have your legal counsel look over policies that you would want to look over. And then we also have the option a couple of years down the road, if you're not quite sure if you're caught up, the trust will send Lillian and I in to do a review and cleanup for $1,000. So those are the fees, and those currently are staying the same. So if you decide that you do want to move forward, first step is to preserve your existing policies, notify us of your intent to join, approve the agreement, which is, I looked at your agenda today. It is a backup to the agenda, but it's not on your agenda for this evening. Provide the trust with the executed agreement. We'd get the invoice rolling, and then you would begin working with your prepaid legal counsel to review your existing policies and merge whatever you would like to keep into those policies. Some of the policies really take some comprehensive review. So for instance, chapter 4 has a whole series of policies on leave, on FMLA leave, your earned paid sick leave, if you buy back leave from employees, if they get leave on retirement. Those are very nuanced issues, and you're going to want someone to look at that and make sure that none of your employees lose out on their leave benefits with your transition. The policies would be provided to you for your review and approval. That can be however your board president and the board decides that you would like to do it. So for instance, last year, Santa Cruz Valley did it in an all-day study session on a Saturday, and then they approved it at their next board meeting. As I mentioned, Flagstaff Unified, Kyrene took this sort of matriculated approach and considered a chapter every month, basically. Once they've reviewed, you would notify of intent to cancel. You'd provide the board policies to us in a Word format. And then you would also want to schedule out the downstream. So for instance, I was on Litchfield Elementary's website today, just making sure we had the agenda right. And you all refer to your policy BBA within the body of your website. So you're going to want to make sure that things like your website are changed, your trainings, your forms, your handbook. So that would take some downstream time once adopted. And then, school districts generally want to know, okay, fine, we've adopted, but who's going to update these policies? And that would be me. That's why I gave up my big job. So I was able to do that for the first time last August, learned a little bit more about how the legislative sausage is made and watched that a little more closely. It's easy because the trust already has lobbyists that follow the legislation. So I kind of tag teamed onto that, wrote up what I thought should be changes to the policies, and those were initiated in August for the legislative changes that were effective in October of this year. The trust will update the policies annually at least, and more often if necessary. So for instance, we're waiting for the Title IX regulations to come out. If those come out, that might necessitate a policy change. That would be another example of maybe a mid-year. The trust is committed to using the same process that we used in the development. So once I drafted those updates, I will send it to the same 4 law firms to review. And as with anything, you all, if you have policies that are unique to you, that you want to make sure are included, that's not a problem. So if there's been, for instance, a dress code policy, that's an example of some that might be unique to your school district. We will have events for boards. So we have a event that's going to be held every August. It's already scheduled for this year, downtown Phoenix, and we're going to have a review of the local legislation, speaker that would be of interest to all, a one-day event. And so that's, if you're concerned about the burden on your administrative team, I've seen school districts hire like a retiree to come in and help them sort of quarterback this policy transition. I had one of our constituents say it's not hard, but it's time consuming. And I think that's true. Lillian and I try to give as much support as we can. Both of us are available to make sure that we answer questions. A lot of times people ask, okay, well, we want to know, where should we put this? We have for instance, the trust doesn't have a voluntary transfer process for certificated teachers. We have one we like. Should it be a procedure? Should it be a policy? Where do we put it? So we try to help answer questions like that. We also have made sure that we can provide the tech support that they need, the assistance in formatting, all that kind of thing. So that's the support that we give. We would also work with their counsel to answer questions if they have it. So next potential steps would be for you to review the model policy agreement and make a decision on it. We have a ton of resources on the website if you want to. Simply going on the trust website and playing around with the policy manuals that are on there might be the most helpful for you in making your decision. But there's also videos on the website, webinars that have been posted on this issue. Or I'm happy to put you in touch with other boards that have completed this in the past. And that is my presentation to my favorite school district elementary board. So
Thank you. I will go through and see. Ms. Moran, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I do. I think this sounds great. I really like the idea of having a nonpartisan group because we are nonpartisan as school board members. I like having a nonpartisan group be in charge of our policies to ensure that there isn't anything on one side or the other that might be swayed. What I'm not sure about, and one of the reasons that I was not ready to make a decision tonight, is I'm not sure of all of the resources that we use from ASBA. Obviously, right now we're looking at the trust versus ASBA because that's who we get our policies from right now. We don't, for the general public, we don't have in-house counsel, so we don't write our own policies. We rely on someone else to, as Ms. McLennan said, go down to the legislature, interpret the laws, make them into policy so that we are in compliance. And so that's basically what this service is providing. So I guess my question is to the administration, if we could get a comparison of what services, not just the board, because the board has attended continuing education, webinars, things like that from ASBA, which it sounds like there could be something comparable, at least to the ASBA law conference that the trust is going to put on. But what other services does the administration use from ASBA, not just what the board uses? And what's the cost comparison? And then what are some potential options? Would it still be possible, and what would it cost for us if we're not ASBA members to go to the law conference? What would that look like? Or would the administration recommend that we maintain membership in both for a transition period to make sure that we're covering both bases on that? So for me, that's the information that I feel like I need in order to make an informed decision on this.
Madam President, Ms. Moran, I do have some information that might be helpful with respect to that. The Arizona School Board Association issues 2 agreements to Litchfield Elementary. One is for policy services and one is for membership. So while you would be making a decision regarding who you would like to receive your policy services from, it would be possible for this board to remain a member of ASBA and take advantage of the things that you're talking about, such as their educational programming or their access for governing board secretaries or things like that. So that might be of interest to the board. And we've had multiple boards. We've had boards that have entirely severed ties, and then we have boards that have maintained their affiliation with ASBA. The trust isn't going to do lobbying. So that's a function that ASBA does, and that's something that we're not going to take positions on in the legislature in a formal manner unless it regards liability coverage, then the trust lobbies. But that would be an example of an area where there would be differences, but it would be possible for you to maintain both relationships if you choose to do so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I can also add some additional information from a financial perspective. So the items that we really engage with ASBA on are that annual membership. We actually procure board docs through a broader agreement that they have with board docs, and then the policy services. As you mentioned, we do take advantage of the law conference, and then we send a board member as a delegate to their meetings, and then there's the ASBA annual conference. When I looked for this fiscal year for our purchase orders related to ASBA, that's it. Looking at what we pay for policy services for ASBA, what's not proposed, but presented tonight is slightly cheaper, not dramatically cheaper. Where there is potentially more significant savings, though, is when you start looking at those more intensive policy reviews that Ms. McLennan described. Those tend to be a little bit more costly through ASBA.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Madam President, if I might address one thing that Mr. Bond brought, the trust can also offer you preferred pricing on board docs if you are not affiliated with ASBA. If you remain affiliated with ASBA, you could still maintain that preferred pricing through ASBA. Or we've had districts procure board docs on their own. So I know that's a valuable tool for your district, and it's not something you would have to give up.
Ms.
Thank you.
Clymer, did you have questions?
I think just one question. You might have gone through it, and if so, I apologize. Once we go through the initial transition and sort of review on your side of whether we decide to blend or, right away or do it over time, is there whether it's monthly or quarterly or something, sort of a policy update or something that you send? I don't know what it's called, but I know that ASBA will sort of provide if there's, and it might not be on our specific cadence, but we'll sort of send things to us that we might not know about or policy updates that we should be aware of. Do you offer that as well?
Madam President, Ms. Clymer, we do. So we would do an annual update based on new legislation, for sure, promised, as
Okay.
soon as we can get it done before the new legislation is taken place. And then if there are requirements for policy updates, we would commit to doing those as soon as that need arises.
Okay.
So, for example, if they change regulation. But in addition, Lillian and I take into account the feedback from members. So for instance, we had members give feedback on one of our procedures related to reporting of injuries, wanting to see some more specific language in there about we had the employee's obligation to report a workplace injury, but not the times associated with the employer's obligation. So we added that and we updated that this week and we sent it out to the 14 districts that are currently members and then the 24 that are transitioning. So we would commit to doing that.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Mr. Owens?
I don't have any questions. My only, I guess, comment would be as soon as we can separate ourselves from ASBA is good in my opinion. So if we transfer to the trust and, do a dual model where they became state members, that's fine. But in my opinion, this is a move in the right direction.
I don't actually have any questions. You covered them all. Everybody asked them. I do appreciate this information. I agree. My concerns actually are more for our staff, and making sure that we don't ask them to take on any more things right now. I mean, I'm not saying we don't do this, but I still have concerns. They're only one person for each job and we can only spend them one time. So my concern is that we're trying to spend our staff multiple ways right now, and this is a huge task. But I would definitely defer to them and how they feel about this. So I think we do have to have more conversations about what your guys' thoughts are in taking on this monumentally huge task in the middle of every other thing we're doing right now. But I appreciate the information and I do think it's a great option for us going forward.
I think that's a very real worry and I applaud your collaboration with your staff. So the time frame is yours. Where the trust is going to be here, whatever time frame the board decides in connection with cabinet, will be the right time for you all. So I do recommend that the transition occur at the fiscal year. So either, you do it this spring and it occurs in June of this year or maybe the next year. We did have 2 districts join mid-year. It just is a little bit clunky. So thank you so much for your time. It was really nice to be here.
Thanks so much for coming. It was nice to see you. again.
Good to see you again.
President Zaidama. So then would a board member need to request that this be put on a future agenda for additional discussion, or is that the next step with this?
Yes, I don't think we're done. Like if anybody has anything they want to add to this, like if we would like to continue discussing this, if we'd like to look at the agreement and consider that, we can do that. I didn't think tonight was the right night for that, as this was kind of sudden, right? So, my hope is that we can make it through the budget and then bring it back, but I am open to what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would like, to your point, I would like to hear the administration's recommendation and time frame and timeline that they think, whether they would like the phased approach or all at once kind of thing. I don't need to know that answer tonight. I just think that would need to be included with an agenda item to approve this if that's where we think we're going.
Yeah, I agree. And also, what does that workload honestly look like on the side of the district so that we can understand whether we're taking this on? I mean, June feels like it's far away and it's just not. So I think Ms. McClellan has enough experience not only with our own district, but at the trust. And if she says, do it at the right time, we should do it at the right time because they've obviously done this many times. So if it's something we can take on this year, I'm in favor of it, but I want to be realistic with the time and resources that we have. So even if it is a recommendation, it could be a recommendation to wait or not, but just really understanding what that looks like from a workload perspective.
Absolutely. So President Zainama, governing board members, community, we'll absolutely put this on a future agenda item. I'll talk to our team here and Dr. Davidson. I'm thinking we will put it as an action item and be able to discuss our recommendations to you as far as if we'll resume with our current practice or if we recommend to you that we want to take on this work. So we will definitely put that on next agenda or future agenda item.
Mr. Owens, did you have any more comments?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next item, which is discussion on the budget. And just a point of whatever the word is. Ms. Moran has informed me she needs to leave at 7:15. So if she walks out, it's because she has a meeting she's got to get to. And so we're going to just keep going. So we're going to try to get through it before she has to go, but we're going to just keep going so that we can be courteous of everybody's time. So
I'm not sure I can talk that fast, but all right. Madam President, members of the governing board, Deputy Superintendent Doozy, colleagues and community, thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the district's budget for the 2024-2025 school year. This presentation aligns with the district's strategic initiatives to increase stakeholder knowledge and understanding of school funding and finance. In tonight's presentation, we will be gathering feedback around the various items administration is considering as part of the administrative recommendation. Our goal is to put potential budget recommendations into financial context tonight to garner your feedback. We will then come back together as an administrative cabinet to finalize the administrative recommendation to bring for approval at the next board meeting. This will help keep us on track to have raises approved well in advance of contracts being due back from employees. As part of our discussion tonight, we'll be looking at our finances holistically with multi-year projections of both our recurring revenues and expenses and our one-time resources. We will look at budgetary priorities for the new year and garner feedback on those priorities. We'll then finish up with a benefits update for the next year. Our maintenance and operation revenues, which support a majority of our people and programs, is driven primarily by weighted student count of our enrollment. The formula is a process by which the state provides different levels of funds per student based on varying student characteristics. Based on our demographic forecasts by applied economics, we anticipate slight growth next year. I'm also anticipating that the 2% legislatively supported inflation adjustment is provided on the base support level per student. This results in estimates of $71.9 million in revenue from the standard funding formula and $11.1 million from our 15% override. These components are then complemented with funding for transportation provided by the state and smaller adjustments. At this point, I estimate that we will have $85.6 million of recurring M&O revenues next year. By looking at a multi-year M&O forecast, we can better put those figures into context for decision-making. We presently believe M&O will end this year with a slight surplus, primarily supported by the district shifting instructionally focused expenses into ESSER 3 to finalize and spend down the remainder of the grant. Current estimates are that those funds will be supporting our M&O operations by $850,000 this year. Adding that spending back to next year, as well as the budget priorities we will discuss tonight, our conservative estimate is that we will have expenses in excess of our M&O revenues by $2.4 million, which you can see in the last row. As we go forward through the years, a 2% raise is assumed. This results in a little over $2 million annual deficit by the end of our forecast period. In short, this shows what we've been discussing, that we are taking a multi-year approach to balancing the budget. This slide shows a similar forecast for our reserve funds. This shows that we will have reserves available to spend going into next year and even forecasted at the end of next year. We are forecasted to first dip below our top reserves target in the 2025-2026 year if no additional cuts are made. These two slides combined tell a story that we still need to continue looking at spending next year, and that we need to target having a balanced budget going into the 2025-2026 year to help ensure that we protect our financial position. I did want to make a comment on the reserve funds and one-time resources prior to us moving on from this point. One reason districts use these funding sources as reserves versus funding significant parts of the operations from them is that they can fluctuate significantly year to year and include some funds such as our community education operations that require their own reserves. Before we move on, I'm going to pause for questions on the financial context. Our next step in the presentation is going into the detail of the budget priorities for next year, which mirror our most recent budget conversations at our last board meeting.
Ms. Moran.
I don't have any questions, but I have a comment. So I am in favor of us budgeting or planning to spend the amount above our upper limit rainy day fund sooner rather than later. And the reason for that is because historically, we have sat on this money and set, not this exact money, but we've always been conservative. We know we have cuts coming because of the ESSER funds going away. So I am in favor of us spending this to get us to, again, that upper limit, which is already extremely conservative in my opinion. So that's my feedback.
Ms. Clymer.
No questions. I agree with that comment though, but no questions for me. Thanks.
Mr. Owens.
I agree.
I agree. So that's it. We can
Great
move on.
feedback. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Matt now.
This slide shows the cost of the raise for our employees. This raise is structured to move 9 positions and 21 employees up based on the results of the compensation study and the review of their individual compensation histories. And by providing a 2% raise for employees in these positions that were at or above the peers based on our compensation study. Continuously reviewing our compensation study and ensuring our employees are reasonably compensated using third-party compensation studies is an integral part of our long-term compensation strategy. A base 2% raise aligns well with the 2% inflation funding adjustment districts are limited to by state statute. At our last board meeting, we discussed a potential change to the timing of payout under our performance pay plans. To garner feedback, we released a survey to all employees eligible to receive performance pay. We received about 444 responses back, with 64% wanting the structure to remain the same. As a result, we're not going to move forward with a recommendation on a change for the timing of performance payout. We're not recommending a change to the classroom site fund or instructional improvement fund compensation for fiscal year 25. The funds will continue to support $350 per teacher from instructional improvement, $7,000 of base compensation, and $5,000 of performance pay compensation for eligible staff. We would like to pause here and see if we have any questions specific to the compensation increase recommendations before we move forward.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I am surprised by these results. I thought folks would want more in their paychecks based on what we talked about, but hey, the numbers don't lie. So if they like what we're doing, let's keep doing it.
Ms. Clymer.
On this slide, I think that's the one that you have up there. So the $7,000 base pay from 11 and 13 buckets, that's going to be throughout the year. And then just the $5,000 performance pay is going to be at the end, is what you're recommending?
Yes, and that's consistent to our current practice.
Right. Okay. So
Yes.
it's just the 5,000 that's now given out at the end of the school year, but the rest of it is just incorporated in their monthly checks throughout. the
Correct.
base pay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Owens.
No questions.
I don't have any questions right now either.
We'll now talk a little bit more about some of the discussion with staffing changes. As a reminder, we have been implementing a restructure of our staffing standards for fiscal year 25, mainly to address the expiration of ESSER 3. Additionally, we needed to support moving teachers previously supported by gifts and donation funds back to maintenance and operations to have a more stable funding source associated with their role. Principals have been very hard at work looking at their data, making staffing decisions with supports from HR and our academic leaders. This has allowed us to forecast the potential impact of our M&O fund. In total, the staffing changes add 6 certified positions to M&O and eliminate 12.6 FTE of classified positions. As a result, we anticipate an increased cost to M&O of about $703,000 at bottom line. This slide shows tier 1 priority staffing that we discussed. What you see is consistent from the last meeting, but also includes the Assistant Director of Transportation. The job description for that position was approved at the last meeting. These positions include roles that directly support services to our district, our students, and our staff. These tier 1 requests also address compliance or other immediate concerns. The tier 2 position requests are again based on the need and availability for existing staff to manage their areas. However, increasing our facility department's ability to maintain and improve the appearance of our campuses has been a point of conversation, and we of course welcome any feedback or conversation the board may have on that. So I'll pause.
Ms. Moran,
No, we reviewed this before, I think. So yeah, I'm good.
Ms. Clymer,
Yeah, I'm good as well. Thank you.
Mr. Owens. Okay, I'm good.
All right. Next, we will look at potential stipends for next year. In our discussion around budget for next year with leaders across the district, we heard that despite the need to balance the budget, that there was desire to put additional resources into our special education area. The goal in mind is to attract and retain talent where we are having a difficult time doing so. Additionally, the intent is to reduce the need to lean on our contracted agencies. Lastly, feedback from our community ed and transportation departments indicated a desire to provide personal days to our bus aides and community ed site leaders who presently don't receive them. This screen shows the cost breakdown for the stipends and personal days. It also highlights our desire to allow employees who have not previously been eligible for dental and vision insurance to make those elections next year at their cost. Total cost for the stipends equals $510,000. You'll note that providing the stipends, there is a savings of $7,800 per instructional aid. We do not have to outsource if the strategy is able to reduce our outsourcing. Additionally, there is a savings of about $36,000 per certified contracted teacher. We do not have to outsource if it is able to reduce our present outsourcing. As we wrap up the discussion on stipends and additional compensation, we want to acknowledge our teachers who take on additional students when we're unable to secure a substitute. Currently, the district only provides the stipend if a teacher gives up their prep. This new stipend will ensure teachers are compensated anytime they're helping provide class coverage. And we would open it up for questions on these items prior to moving to benefits.
Ms. Moran,
I'm in favor of using stipends to try to decrease our dependency on contracted services. That's a smart move in the long run. I'm also in favor of using stipends to help give our teachers who are taking on more some monetary compensation.
Ms. Clymer.
I have a couple of questions. On slide 18, where you just list out, looks like all special education stipends on that slide, except for the personal days at the bottom. Will we be offering any stipends? I believe, I know last year, maybe 2 years ago as well, we offered stipends to El Thomas Heck and maybe one other Title I school for that. Will any of those Title I stipends be offered, or is that not necessary at this time?
I don't think we're seeing the same situations that we were seeing at the time that made us propose those forward. And those were supported, at least some of them, out of ESSER 3. And so that funding source is, as we know, dried up. So at this time, we're not recommending a continuation of that.
Okay. Okay. I mean, if they're not needed, I can agree with that, but we're coming up with this money from somewhere. So if we still need to be giving a stipend to folks that are working at Title I campuses or El Thomas Heck specifically, or any of those schools, I think we need to keep doing that. We can't just say, well, it was ESSER, we're not doing it, because there's a lot of money on this slide right here that we didn't have before, and now we're finding ways to get there. So I just want to make sure that we're not abandoning one for the other. Like if we need them all, we've got to figure that out.
Just to add a little bit more information about this, it is not all of our specialized programs. It's the ones where we have the most contracted aides currently or contracted teachers. So we looked at the data to see which places and spaces needed that. And that's how we came up with those specific specialized programs. Typically in those classrooms, more needs to be done. There might be feeding, there might be bathrooming, there might be toileting needs. And so that's very different than some of our other classrooms where they can walk in and teach small groups. As far as the funding, it's hopefully going to pay for itself by not having to have those contracted aides or teachers. That's where that funding is. If we do this right and if this does work, then that money will actually be recouped just by not having those contracted teachers.
Okay, I think what you're pointing to is like, if you go to the next slide on 19, in the notes, it kind of talks about the break even numbers, 29 contracted aides, 8 contracted certified teachers looks like. The notes say that we're unlikely to break even. Is that what I mean, is that what you mean? Like most of this will be paid for, but we're unsure, at least in year one, that it'll all be paid for. So we'll pay for a little bit and then over time, we're hoping that will make up a difference.
The reason I said it's unlikely for it to pay for itself is the percentage of our contracted that this would need to eliminate. I have no doubt that it may eliminate some of our contracted, that's the goal. And beyond that, I definitely believe it will help support the reduction in the trend towards contracted. I think it will help convince some staff to remain with us as opposed to going and working for those contracted agencies. The cost I show on the slide, as with any time I present potential additions during the budget process, is the total potential cost. So, and what I mean by that is the roughly $500,000 I'm showing is effectively if no reduction in contracted occurred and we just paid this out, which is possible. It's unlikely, but I have no real way to have a better estimate of how many would come back to our staff. The reason I said it's unlikely to pay for itself is that we would need 50% reduction in contracted, and I just don't think that this will get us there. There's a lot of things about working for a contracted agency that we just simply can't touch. The primary one being if you aren't interested in the great benefits that ASRS provides you, the contracted agencies provide you an opportunity to not engage in that plan, whereas we obviously legally cannot provide that opportunity. And so it does at the end of the day come down to a personal choice of those individuals, how they prefer their benefits and compensation to be structured.
Yeah, understood. I'm in support of the stipend, so no problem here. Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
No questions or comments.
I don't have any questions, but I'm definitely in support of these stipends for our special education staff. We can provide more consistent learning for our students if we don't have the constant turnover that is happening right now. I mean, as a parent of a kid that's in special education, who's had multiple teachers in her stride room this year alone, I just know what a benefit it would be if they could just have a teacher that stayed there all year. And the only way they're going to get that is if we can get them and come work for us. So anything we can do to help those kiddos have a better learning experience, I'm all in favor of.
All right, moving on to some benefits. We have good news to share around our dental and vision renewals, which have already come back with no cost escalation for next year. We anticipate hearing about medical renewal on March 1st from ASBATE, which is the normal timeline each year. We plan to explore a similar approach in fiscal year 25 by having a free plan available while also minimizing the cost absorbed in other plans, as this has an impact on future budget cuts. This approach is supported by the compensation study in the sense that our benefits were shown to be cheaper to our employees than those offered in peer districts. And that wraps everything up. Do you guys have any questions on benefits?
Ms. Moran?
I will just comment by saying I am in favor of using a similar strategy to last year for the health insurance premiums. Ideally, if we can have no increase to the district and maintain a free plan, quote unquote free, out-of-pocket plan for our employees, that's fantastic. I do understand that at some point that table or that tide is going to turn. But at least if we can offer that as long as possible, that would be great.
Ms. Clymer,
No questions. Thanks.
Mr. Owens.
No questions, thanks.
I don't have any questions either.
I do want to point out that in the multi-year forecast that I showed, that assumption of not absorbing any of the cost is baked in. And so if we chose not to, that would increase the deficits that we've been discussing. So thank you.
So I think you guys are done, right?
I told you we'd talk fast.
I-
We were trying to help.
I am so proud of everyone tonight.
Well, then I move to adjourn the meeting.
I
I
will
will-
second.
I think that was Ms. Moran. Ms. Moran, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.